So, Table, I want to ask your opinion. If you could take a look at the groups on this board. We've got CARE, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, Greenpeace, Calguns, Franklin Armory. Got a gun manufacturer, a church, environmental group. What do you think they have in common? Any guesses?
Politics.
All right, then.
Things that start with...
Nothing. Okay. At the moment, anyway, they have the NSA in common. Actually, they have the NSA as a common enemy. Why? Well, they've joined together in a lawsuit filed yesterday against the NSA for collecting the phone records and emails of their members. They say that this violates their First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights for collecting, quote, sensitive information about their personal, political, and religious activities. Now, the First Amendment, of course, protects our right to communicate anonymously and associate privately. The Fourth Amendment restricts warrantless surveillance. And, of course, the Fifth Amendment protects Americans' due process rights and federal surveillance law. All of these rights, the lawsuit claims, are being violated by the NSA. The concern here, of course, is that the government, in collecting all of this data, is now in a position to know what kinds of groups and associations you can belong to, and no one knows, given all these recent revelations about the IRS, the DOJ, NSA, what exactly the government is doing with all of that information. But aside from bringing all of these disparate groups together, what will this lawsuit actually accomplish? Let's ask one of the plaintiffs in the case. Joining us now is Gene Hoffman, the president of Calguns. Gene, first tell me, how did this lawsuit come about? Did you seek it out or did someone approach you?
Well, here in California, the gun owner population and the folks who believe in the rest of the Bill of Rights and the EFF are pretty well overlapped. And so from that perspective, it's something that a lot of our members had heard about. There was certainly a real outcry from our membership about the disclosure that, their telephone records were being kept, that potentially their emails were being kept. So it was a real concern for, someone who would own a gun in California.
Well, yeah, and it strikes me that for gun owners in particular who are so often villainized by the government, finding out that I belong to a gun club or that I'm on a mailing list for a gun manufacturer is akin to finding out I probably own a gun. And to me, isn't that kind of a gun database?
It is. I mean, in some weird ways, it's a certain type of registration. And, not every place is Texas. Here in California, gun owners are a minority and a not very well liked minority. And when you add in some of our co-plaintiffs like Normal, it's not uncommon, and because this is a California gun owner, to be, shall we say, a medical marijuana practitioner and still want to have the right to self-defense.
It's not hard to draw conclusions. It's not hard to draw hypotheticals. In fact, it's not necessary because we've seen here in the state of New York, when there are lists of gun owners and they are a minority and they are a persecuted minority, what can be done? We've seen the list turned over to newspapers. We've seen those home addresses printed. That being said, while the risks are clear, I don't know about the legitimacy or the prospects of the suit. I have said on this program before, the legal claim, and I'll love to hear Gene at some point on this as well, I just don't know if you're going to be able to claim that you have been clearly violated here by constitutional rights.
But bring back sort of those communist-era witch hunts, right? The right of free association, those blacklisting attempts. Doesn't that recall to you sort of a different era when the government was trying to find out what groups you belong to?
Oh, look, there's a difference between condemning this and thinking there's a legal claim. I condemn it with
Can you sue
the highest.
Can you sue preemptively to say there is this danger?
You won't be able to sue because the NSA is going to defend this to the hilt. They always have said, and they're consistent on this, that just because information is public does not mean it is necessarily unclassified. Well, that doesn't mean that obviously you can't talk about it or you're going to go to jail. It does mean that they will not publicly acknowledge something that may or may not be classified for the purposes of, for example, a lawsuit like this. Just because information may be out there doesn't mean they're going to get dragged into court and say, oh yeah, you're right. However, even Sensenbrenner, who is the Wisconsin Republican who wrote the 2001 Patriot Act, he says that Section 215, which is what deals with this part of it, might actually expire in 2015. So, Will, to your point, it may not be the legal process, it may be the political process that finally eliminates this if we have the discussion.
Gene, let me ask you this. At the heart of this lawsuit to you, what is the issue? Is it discrimination or is it privacy?
It's the associational rights. I mean, look, this is actually, we're talking about the NSA. We need to remember that FBI and Department of Justice are involved with this. So the FBI is getting these same records. When you actually look back at what J. Edgar Hoover did in the civil rights movement and tracking King's bodyguards and the Deacons for Defense and Justice, there is very real existing case law where you had people trying to turn over the NAACP's associational records. It is very easy to build that associational record directly from the phone records we're talking about. So, the fact that DNI has gone out and said that they're doing this makes it very hard for them to then disclaim that they're not doing this in the court of law.
The legal hurdle, and we've talked about in this program when we broke down these programs, the one that any kind of plaintiff, in this case Calguns, is going to have to get over is the idea that you have a right to privacy in something you do not own. We've talked about there is case law. The government does not consider your phone record something that you own, and if you can't own it, if you don't own it, you can't have a privacy right in it. However, this lawsuit serves a purpose, and it serves the purpose of a flag being raised up, and that flag's value is, as Buck said, Matt, the political process. You show people that it's something that may not be illegal, but is unjust, and you correct that politically.
And I think you put up there, what, 5 or 6 groups, SE?
And there's a bunch more.
But this, you take that group, those number of groups, that represents most of America in my mind. I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Right.
So from a political standpoint, as you just mentioned, Will, and Buck mentioned earlier, that it's not just these groups. And a lot of those groups may be considered outliers to me.
A little weird,
not the
some of
norm,
those groups.
But
but there's a bunch of them.
But in
You're
general,
right.
as Americans, we don't want anybody listening to our phone calls.
And I think-
that's why
yeah.
this becomes political, because once everybody comes together and realize what's actually really going on here, there's going to be pressure put on politicians.
You'll never get the NSA to come out and fight this in public. It just fundamentally will not happen. What you may have is that this provision of the Patriot Act expires, and then there'll be the opportunity to pass legislation once you let this part of it go away that says you can't just collect these records en masse. I don't care if it makes us safer or if it's even good law necessarily.
Well, I think
we
the
could pass
strength of
statute to
this-
say
right.
that.
And I think the strength of this argument, to your point and your point, Matt, is that it's not just gun owners or gun manufacturers. This is a disparate group of people representing all different kinds of interests. Right. Chances are, if you're out there, and you should take a look at the full list, by the way, you associate or identify with one of these groups in some regard.
And as a political matter, that's a huge coalition.
Yeah.
That's a huge political coalition to go and petition our legislators and lawmakers to say, look, if you have everybody from CARE to Calguns to Greenpeace to the First Unitarian Church, you've got a lot of people who are actively concerned about this.
That's going to be necessary. To your point, Buck, I'm not sure the political will is there
I'm
yet.
not sure
I definitely don't think the legislators' will is there yet, but I'm not sure the political will under them is there.
This is a fascinating grouping of different interests and different groups here. However, when we look at the polling on how people feel about the NSA and terrorism and scary guys trying to blow up airplanes that have women and children and families on them, all of a sudden people go, you know what, maybe I'm going to let the NSA do this. At least about 56%, I think, in one poll.
Well, I think we should point out that there was a hearing today on the Hill in which not this case, but this issue was discussed. Democratic Congressman John Conyers of Michigan had this to say. He said, I feel very uncomfortable about using aggregated data on everybody. This is unsustainable, outrageous, and must be stopped immediately. So I think there is political will to take a look at this, especially if you're getting a Democrat to come on and say this has to be stopped. But Gene, let me just get you to weigh in on your friends and allies over there. How interesting or awkward or exciting was it for you to have all of these disparate groups come on board and sign on to this lawsuit with you?
Well, look, I think that's the point. I mean, normally you wouldn't find a gun rights organization with NORML or with CARE, but the thing is by simply saying that we all share that desire, and again, a lot of the conversation here about the law is about the Fourth Amendment, but the First Amendment protects all of our abilities to come together and become political organizations and advocate for what we believe in. And, look, it may very well be that the Fourth Amendment would have let them, grab our customer lists, our membership lists, but it doesn't seem that the First Amendment would allow them to do the same thing. That wide group of people is what's so critical of this, because it really does affect everyone's rights.
So, Gene, do you have any intentions to also go down the political route, lobbying Capitol Hill to take a closer look at this?
Well, certainly we would, because this is right in our interest set. I mean, we run a hotline here in California that you can call and figure out whether you're a felon or not, and I can tell you that our members don't want to have a record of that phone call. We've got to see a change here. We can't have these aggregate records. Now, we certainly don't oppose, using warrants the way they're supposed to be used. When, you actually have, good gosh, an Al-Qaeda person call our hotline, I'm okay with the fact that you got a warrant based on reasonable suspicion or probable cause. But when every single phone call goes into an FBI, DOJ, and NSA database, that's a real problem.
Will, final word, do they have a case?
I don't think they have a legal case. I think they have a huge political case.
All right, well, we'll track it for you guys. Gene, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was a busy day on the Hill. They even got around to talking about the economy. Amy has the details in tonight's Q&A.